And welcome back to another Between the Pages book chat. And today we have author Peter Servidio with us. And he's here to talk about his post apocalyptic book, Return from Darkness, the first book in the Earth Has Fallen series. So I'm going to turn it over to him and let him introduce himself. So take it away.
Great. Well, again, thank you so much for having me. As you said, Peter Servidio, I'm a fledgling author, so still fairly new at this. Been writing in my author career for about 8 or 9 months now, actually being published and putting books out. Prior to that, I've been writing my whole life. Married, live in Maine with my wife and my 3 daughters that keep me very, very busy. And you'll probably hear my dog in the background barking every once in a while, Mr. Gus. He's my writing partner. We'll sit together, and he naps while I write. So it's quite a good partnership for him. And just trying to get my name out there, hoping people can enjoy reading some of my novellas and books. And I'm just real excited to be here. So again, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So tell us a little bit about the book and the series. Can we expect?
Definitely. So the Earth Has Fallen series is actually 4 books, and then it also has a prequel, which is Laredo, which talks about the main character. And the premise of the book is nuclear global war has devastated the world, and it's kind of scary, especially with what we're going on right now in the world. Actually looking at what I wrote, I'm like, oh, this is, I hope I'm not prolific, is all I'm going to say. Communities survive by going underground to try and survive the fallout, and all the experts have said that within 10 years that the Earth would clear, we go back to the surface. When the book kicks off in Return to the Surface, it's been a little over 50 years, and the fallout has not dissipated. So communities are living fully underground, and they have groups called topsiders who will go up in all their hazmat gear and masks to kind of scavenge and see if the Earth is coming back to life or not. And Laredo, who is one of the new topsiders, finds quite a big adventure on the surface as he goes through. In the first book, he realizes that the world is much larger than they thought. And then as the series progresses through books 2, 3, and 4, they start to look at, Laredo looks at, is it the devastation of the Earth that's the worst enemy? Is it the fantastical things that have happened because of the devastation? Or is it other human beings that you can be worried about? And we kind of follow his journey from start to end and trying to bring humanity back to the surface.
Okay, so what were your inspirations for writing this series? And maybe come up with the idea.
Yeah, I've always been a huge fan of post-apocalyptic movies and books. I Am Legend was a great movie, both the original and the remake. Maze Runner. I just loved anything that kind of is dystopian, post-apocalyptic. And I sat down one day this past, would have been now about a year and a half ago, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to pull the trigger. I'm going to write a book. So my wife said, all right, well, you're going to lay it out? And I said, absolutely not. I'm just going to sit down and start writing. And that's what I did. And I'm definitely a full-fledged pantser. Very little planning goes on. In the edits, we will definitely fix things as we go through once I go through the editing processes. But the original book, when I wrote it, was a start to finish. I sat down and I wrote it in about 12 hours of Return to the Surface was written, and start to finish, just pounded it out. And then I went back through and started looking at, how to clean it. Learned a lot about the writing process, I must say, about ARC readers and beta readers and editing and all that fun stuff you don't think about when you say, I'm just going to be a writer. I'm just going to be a writer. But yeah, so we went through that process, and then, like I said, basing it on just my love of different movies and what would happen if, God forbid, one of the 11 nuclear powers in our planet decided to hit the button. What would that look like? And the book starts off talking about the devastation. The first chapter and a half really is just it's they always say, right, show, don't tell. But the first chapter and a half of the book, I'm laying out the background. I'm laying out the destruction of what's happened and the planet going from, over 7 billion people to being down to, under 1 billion people. And, how would you survive? What would we do? No sunlight. Suddenly we're not raising corn and wheat. We're underground living off fungus and root vegetables. So that's kind of where we went with that. And then I kind of just let it go on its own and some different developments happened that even surprised me when I was writing. So that's one fun part about being a pantser is I didn't quite know where I was going to go in all this, and it went to great places.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm familiar with the books. So yeah, they sound like a fascinating series. So, um, tell us a little bit about the main character. What's he like?
Yeah, so Laredo grew up underground, spent his whole life underground, and he's a young man. The book starts off in book 1. He's about 18 years old, and the prequel kind of follows his early life growing up in Tolaran, which is actually the old Emery Deep Mines in Utah, is where his community is stationed. And he's unlike most of the kids. Most of the kids that are born underground end up having sucking lung disease or different deformities from the radiation that may have leaked down or their parents may have experienced. And Laredo was one of the few that was born fairly normal, fairly healthy, which is both his blessing and his curse. So his parents try and, of course, hide him when he was younger from the council that oversees their group because they don't want him to become a topsider. Because most people that are healthier are deemed topsiders that can go scavenge and see what's going on. It's very dangerous. Of course, being a teenager, right, as he is, he wants to be a topsider. So he does everything in his power to go against his parents and make that happen. To the point of it, when the book starts, of being a little bit cocky when he meets the head recruiter of the topsiders, how he starts telling how he feels he can be his best recruit yet. He soon finds out that being a topsider is a lot harder than he thought. Throughout the book, I don't really want to say love interests, but he does meet some people that he becomes endeared to, both other topsiders as well as some strangers that he meets. And he learns again, the world is much bigger than just Emery Deep Mines. And his most driving trait is he really wants to see the sun again, or I should say, see the sun for the first time. He's seen it in books. He's heard about it from his family and his friends. But he has never actually seen it. He wants to see what the sun looks like. And every time he goes to the top, it's just this fallout, mist, ash, gray darkness. And he knows that living underground, there's got to be more than life than just darkness, both above and below.
Yeah, so we get a couple of comments who think you're the interesting concept there, scary reality, and Barrett thinks it's an interesting concept. So got some interest there from our viewers.
Thank you.
You said that a lot of the people in the underground complexes are born sick or whatever. I think that's an interesting addition because, a lot of the post-apocalyptics, the survivors, you don't often see the continuing effects. So I like that idea. That was an interesting point there you made. So tell us a little bit about the world, both in and out of the bunker.
Definitely. So underground, society has recreated itself. So there's a council that oversees what's going on. Many of the old jobs don't exist anymore from what we'll call the pre-bomb era. Underground, you have people that tinker. You have, of course, your fungus farmers. You have your torch lighters that go around and keep the torches lit. So there's always some light. But that, of course, brings its own issues with smoke and everything else being underground, looking at ventilations. Definite hierarchy. The council oversees everything that happens inside of Tolaran in this community. And it's made up of, I believe, top of my head, trying to think back, 12 members. There's one elder council member who's kind of the grand poobah, and then the other council members will convene with him. But if you want to go topside to do a scavenging mission as a topsider, if you want to start a new profession, if you want to create a pair of clothes out of some of the resources that are there, everything goes through the council, and they need to approve everything because, again, the council has deemed itself the overseers of life in this community, and they kind of track everything piece by piece. And there's some neat twists you'll learn as you go through the novel with the elders and council members and who's who. But Laredo, he follows through on what he's supposed to do, does actually speak well with the council. The council like him because he's young, he's youthful, he's energetic, and he's healthy. So, of course, they also see how can we use him to better our community. Like I said, blessing and a curse. So he ends up going on some missions topside and going further than pretty much anyone else has gone before. And that leads into some of the hiccups that he encounters, both traveling through the Midwestern United States up through Midwestern Canada.
Oh, that's nice. My country got in the book.
Yeah, and then on the outside, like I said, the outside is it's dark, it's dreary, and unfortunately, not everyone who was outside the blast zones made it underground to shelters. So there are some encounters with what we call I didn't use the word zombies in the book, but they're deformed human beings who have been radiated and have radiation poisoning, and they pretty much are very primal, as you see in a lot of post-apocalyptic type stories. Their whole purpose of surviving is to survive. So they're hungry, they're looking for food, and they don't care if it's animal, mineral, or vegetable. They're going to try and eat it. They still do have spoken language, and Laredo does encounter this group on one of his journeys topside, as well as encountering another stranger, which leads to a whole new adventure that opens his eyes to the possibility of there being a way to get back to the surface and have a community that can see the sun again.
Cool. So, did you have a trouble with any of the scenes writing them in the book, and what was the hardest one you had to write?
Yeah, there were a few scenes I had trouble with as I was going through, and I had wrote the whole thing pretty quickly, but then as I went through the read through and the rewrite, some of the scenes, especially the scenes where there was some fighting going on between the humans and the others, we lose some characters along the way. And I struggled with wanting to give detail and wanting to make it feel real, but also not wanting it to be grotesque or overly descriptive. I tried to walk that line. So I'd say there's some mild gore in some of it, but not excessive. My goal was to kind of have it towards that young adult type style book. But when there was a fight going on or something happened that was devastating, I also wanted it to be, when you read through the scene, that you could feel it. And for me, that was probably one of the hardest pieces, being a new writer, was trying to figure out how do I convey that emotion. And I think on my fourth or fifth rewrite, I think I finally hit it, which was nice. And I've had some really great editors that helped me along the way with that. So,
yeah. I write horror, so I know sometimes finding the line is a bit difficult, because you want to know, do you want to push it, or maybe not.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, what was your favorite scene to write in the book or series?
My favorite scene, I can't say too much about it because I don't want to give too much away, but when Laredo makes it to Elysium Fields and he first sees this other community, that scene was really fun to write, as he kind of sees it in front of him and walks into this new community, because it's very, very different than what he's been used to his whole life. And that was a fun scene to write, kind of that juxtaposition of what he's known his whole life and now what this other group has been living.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about some of the secondary characters.
So there's a few secondary characters. Probably my favorite secondary character is Michael, who is the leader of Elysium Fields. And he comes off as a very caring individual for his people. Of course, we always say, when you look at any group, right, if they're working for themselves, the group that's working for... Sorry, my dog. When you see a story, right, your group's always the good guys. So Michael sees his group as the good guys in Elysium Fields, and he sees Laredo and this other society as possibly being bad. So he does everything he can to protect his community, as well as trying to accept Laredo and his friends, but there's always a little bit of doubt in his mind. I kind of took inspiration for Michael a little bit, and my wife laughs at me about this, but I said, I based him a little bit on Negan from The Walking Dead, kind of the very charismatic, very likable guy who has that mean streak, where suddenly if he thinks you're going to cross him or hurt his people, wow, it's Jekyll and Hyde. So he was probably my favorite sub-character. And then the other character I really enjoyed writing a little bit about was Pascal, which is Laredo's best friend. And Pascal's also someone that wants to become a topsider, like his friend. But Pascal has some different challenges that he goes through on the way. But he was a fun character, because I think Pascal had a lot of layers to him as a secondary character. And he's a character I'd like to go back to someday, I think, and rewrite his story, because I think his story would be very interesting as well. Especially as the series progressed, his story got more and more involved. He becomes almost a secondary main character further on in the series.
Yeah, there's your companion book.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so what are your characters afraid of?
Everything.
I guess in that world it would be.
The apocalypse. I think the biggest, they're scared of what they don't know, and I think that's the Riddle's biggest thing is he's excited to go explore this world and get out there, but also what are you going to find? Sometimes myths can be scary, but the truth can be scarier than any myth. And I think he realizes that as he goes forward is that, he'd heard stories of being up top. He heard stories of these ash walkers, these beings that are out there. He's heard stories of the possibility of other communities and how they're going to want to defend themselves from outsiders just because of need for resources. But he realizes that the stories he heard when he gets out there were minor compared to what he encounters. And that reality of life is really scary. Besides that, he's your typical, 18, 19, 20 something who is ready to take on the world. When the story starts, he feels invincible. He learns as the story moves forward, he's not invincible. And I think that was a really neat thing for him to realize moving forward. And it can kind of be seen in some of his actions as the series progresses, is that he goes from being a lot less rash as things move forward. He realizes that, things can hurt you on the outside, and not everything has to be a physical harm. There's also psychological harm and emotional harm that can get you. So.
Okay, so do you have a favorite character? And you can say no.
I know, right? The cop is, I love them all. Right? That's what all authors say. I love every character I write. Honestly, right now, I keep going back through. Michael is probably my favorite character that I've written. I love that he can play the good guy, and drop that, he can play the bad guy. Yet in his mind, everything he does is for the good of his people. So he doesn't really see when he's being bad about being bad. One example is when he meets Laredo for the first time. Laredo is with another young lady who brings him to this community, Elysium Fields. And Michael, I looked at her and he's like, I thought I told you not to bring strays home. And she kind of is like, well, this isn't a stray. This is a guy that helped me out here. And Michael kind of turns after with a big smile. She's like, oh, welcome. It's so nice to have you here. And you kind of see him kind of switch back and forth depending on who he's talking to and what his ultimate goal is, and kind of weighing out what's happening. There's another scene. I'm not going to go into too much detail far, but in Elysium Fields, they do have some pigs. Some nice big piggies. And unfortunately, some of Laredo's party has a very intimate encounter with those pigs due to Michael taking something that she says literally. And unfortunately, we end up losing that character in a, again, walk the line, gruesome kind of way.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm familiar with what pigs can do.
Yes.
Anyway, so you write a post-apocalyptic fiction. Are you planning to branch out into other genres, or are you going to stick with that for now?
Yeah, I've been trying to kind of sow my oats, right, in writing. So I've written the Earth Has Fallen series. I've written another one called Agents of Tomorrow, which is post-apocalyptic. But then I've tried my hand at some short stories. I've done some horror short stories. One's The Spoon, and I did one, The Tale of Abigail Fell, which are kind of paranormal horrors. Tried a little bit of crime writing, detective type writing. My dad used to be a police officer. He was a detective for many years, so I kind of tried writing a book, kind of that style for him. And then I'm working right now on actually a fantasy novel, a classic, old school Dungeons and Dragons, slay the evil bad guy fantasy novel. And I do think, though, when I'm finished kind of this foray into trying different types of genres, that I'm going to be coming back to post-apocalyptic. That's something that I really do enjoy writing about. It's just tough right now writing about it and then turning on the news every night and kind of seeing it happening in front of us. So I've kind of stepped back a little bit for the time being and writing some of the other genres to kind of keep my own sanity, I guess, is how I'd say it.
Yeah, understandable. So I think we'll wrap the interview up here and tell everybody where they can find you and your books.
Yeah, so pretty much I'm on Amazon, so Amazon.com, on Kindle Unlimited as well. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can grab anything I write for free on there and check it out. My handle is at Servidio Peter, and my or Writings by Servidio, depending if you're on TikTok or not. I've been trying the whole TikTok trend and haven't quite figured it out yet. I'm a little and that in between age. My 11-year-old daughter's like, "No, Dad, do this." So I'm working with her on that. I have Writings by Servidio is my website. I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook group where I do giveaways and promotions and readings, and pretty much Amazon. If you go there, look up Peter Servidio, you can get my author page there and link to everything that I have. And, I'd love to see anybody there and let me know what you think.
Yeah, great. And I have his book this in the description, as well as the series and his Amazon page. So be sure to check it out. And thank you again for being here today. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And join us next weekend with another episode of Between the Pages Book Chat. And that's all for now. So bye.